Kristi Dosh, who covers sports business for Forbes. She's the founder, Business of College Sports, and adjunct professor at the University of Florida, a recovering attorney and author of the Athletes NIL Playbook, which is releasing soon. Kristi, thanks so much for being on the show. There are not, because it is a new era, there's probably not much competition in the market or somebody who's written as in-depth a work as you have. Did you see, because of your job, because of teaching and all that, the gap in the space for something for athletes so they can pick something up and learn just basics of what they should do?
Yeah, when I heard NIL was coming, starting with California's law in 2019, I spent a lot of 2020 before NIL was even going to go into effect, sort of thinking about how the landscape was going to change and how I wanted to be a part of it, because I have a really entrepreneurial spirit, and I knew that athletes were now going to have the opportunity to pursue a lot of the things that I had done around writing books and monetizing my blog and getting paid to speak and going on podcasts and all these things I had already done, and just really wanted to help be a part of that and to help athletes figure out how to navigate that. Because at their age, I definitely not only didn't know how to do that, I didn't even really have the drive for it at that age. And so I'm really impressed by the number of athletes who have embraced this and have set themselves up for success that's going to take them far beyond their sport and beyond graduation, which I love seeing.
What do you feel after you've written all this is still something that's missing for the athletes to be able to take advantage of, or that they need to protect them?
It's still just education. Athletic departments at the collegiate level offer some level of education that varies a lot from school to school, and you really don't see much of it at all when you get outside of the Power Four, and certainly not when you get outside of Division I. So Division 2 and 3 student athletes don't get much of that, and some of them are doing really well because they've got great natural instincts, or they've got parents who are helping guide them who have experiences in some of these places. But the high school level and below, there is no education. There's nothing for the athletes. There's nothing for the parents. And so sort of the biggest surprise for me as we've moved through the last 4 years of having NIL is the number of emails I get from the parents of high school athletes because they don't know where to go. And I show up in Google searches when you start Googling NIL. So I think they find me that way. And it has led to me creating a big Facebook group specifically for parents where we can talk about NIL, and I can give some training and education, and then eventually led me to write a book as well, because I just want to get more education sooner in the process, because there are a lot of high school athletes who are looking to go ahead and get started before they even get to college. And even I've got a very successful 12-year-old in my Facebook group, so not even high school age yet.
Wow, 12 years. Well, and Kristi, the timing, there's various states that are passing laws, and I think Texas is now getting into that mix where high school athletes will be able to profit off of NIL at that level. What are your thoughts, especially given you just said there's a lot of lack of education out there, and now you're about to just throw on to people like, hey, now your high school kid can start making this money before they even get to college. How do you feel about that? What are the upsides? Obviously the money, but obviously there's downsides that can come with that as well if we don't execute this properly.
The 4-burner, side-burner, side-sear burner with Clearview glass stainless steel grill from Monument Grills. Made of tempered glass, which is strong, insulated, and allows you to check your grilling without lifting the lid. Our porcelain-coated cast iron cooking grids offer a large cooking surface of 513.3 square inches, primary cooking area, with even heat cooking. The Monument Grills include LED control knobs and are easy to light with pilotless electronic ignition. Better grilling, better value, Monument Grills.
Yeah, there are definitely some concerns when we're talking about athletes that are under 18. They're not able to sign their own contracts. Their parents are signing their contracts for them. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. That's on kind of a case-by-case basis. But, for example, one thing I wrote about in the book and that I sort of learned was there was a story of a couple of professional athletes who, when they had been teenagers and were excelling in their sport, and I think one of them was European and so had not been subject to NIL rules here, and another one was in a sport outside of the NCAA pipeline, and their parents had signed these contracts on their behalf. And one of them, the parent owned trademarks for the athlete's name. He's now grown and is an NBA player, and he doesn't even own his own name. His mother owns it, and she's actually been preventing him from some of the monetization he's wanted to do. So not that every parent out there would be like that, but there are some issues at that level, because you're talking about, I said a 12-year-old is doing deals. We've got 15, 16, 17-year-olds doing deals. And even if they're not being taken advantage of, they don't necessarily always understand what they're agreeing to do. I don't think that means they shouldn't be able to do it, but I do think it means we need more education at that level.
It's like child actors.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
it's very similar.
Yeah. Like when you described that, it sounded very much to me like the so many sad stories we see of the child actors that got taken advantage of by bad parents. What regulation, if any, do you feel needs to be made in the NIL space?
Number one for me, this is my soapbox, is agents have to be certified. I think the NCAA should have some sort of certification process. All the major professional leagues have it. And for that reason, only about half of the states have any sort of athlete agent laws or certification registration processes, because they've largely relied on the pro leagues to do it. And when I was in law school in the early aughts, I interned at the WTA Tour, and I helped write the first agent code there, because most of their athletes were represented by their parents. And sorry to all the parents out there, but there are some parents out there who probably shouldn't be acting as agents for their children, and it had become a problem. And so they were going to start certifying agents within their league. And the NCAA, as far as they've gone, is to have a voluntary registration. There are so many people out there claiming to be NIL agents, because any of us could walk out our front door right now and say, you know what, I'm an NIL agent. You don't have to have any, sort of background. You don't have to pass any kind of test, no sort of experience. So if athletes don't know the right questions to ask before they hire these agents, some of them are ending up in really bad situations.
We were just talking before you came on about Najee Canaday and her $1 million payday from Texas Tech. She was very candid. She even said the exact amount when interviewed on ESPN last night. A lot of that is not out there. Is there a middle ground where athletes don't have to share everything that they're making, but we can know what these budgets are like, so that there's maybe a little more transparency, and the rumor mill can maybe slow down a little bit?
It's tough, because on the one hand, it would actually be beneficial for athletes to know what other athletes are making, because it would make them more knowledgeable when they're negotiating, and I think would allow some of them to be getting higher dollar amounts if they understood what their teammates and what their peers at other schools were getting. So I like transparency for that reason. But on the other hand, we don't require it anywhere else. We don't require it of professional athletes. We don't require it of YouTube influencers who aren't athletes. So why do student athletes have to disclose that? So I understand why people have been against disclosure for that reason. As far as knowing sort of where everybody's playing, at least with revenue sharing, everybody will have a limit on the revenue sharing side. So we'll know what the maximum is there. But we know that many of them are going to go above and beyond that with what they're able to do with NIL deals outside of revenue sharing. And there really is no way to make that more transparent or to curb that unless we were to go to some sort of cap, which isn't going to happen unless athletes are employees and are collectively bargaining, because everybody points to the pro leagues and says, look, they have a cap. Well, they have a cap on salaries, not on endorsement and sponsorship income, and they collectively bargain for it. So really different situation.
What do you think? Oregon just passed a law that will allow for some shielding there. Texas actually just signed a bill into law about kind of similar, in that schools can directly pay athletes. So that paves the way for a CBA if it should happen. What do you think about the laws that have been written, and why not use that as sort of a guide for a CBA?
Yeah, I think the biggest impediment to there being a CBA is just the impediments to athletes becoming employees, that there are still, I would say most people within the NCAA and within the member schools don't want athletes to be employees. There's some exceptions. We've heard some coaches and even some athletic directors come out who seem to be moving to that side. And, I've even heard arguments that everybody would sort of, not only would the athletes be better off, but, athletic departments would be in a better position, because right now it's sort of all over the place. And then at least we would have structure and, maybe better competitive balance. But there's a lot that changes about college athletics if some or all of the athletes become employees. And when I talk to athletes, not all of them want to be employees when they find out exactly how that would work and how they might be, let go from teams and not necessarily having scholarships or not having them honored. If they were to move to true employment status, their student athlete experience might look really different in some good ways and some bad ways. I still think it's probably coming though. And I'm not somebody who's necessarily advocated for it over the years, but when I try to look at it objectively, I think that's where this is headed because there is no other way to rein this in that is legal. So I think that's where we're headed.
Is there a carve out that would maybe make a college athlete CBA different than, say, a professional CBA, or does it need to be more black and white?
Yeah, there's not in the sense. I just was at a big conference with other lawyers, and we were all sort of discussing this. There is no such thing as collective bargaining without them being employees. That doesn't mean Congress couldn't pass something saying collective bargaining would be allowed without athletes being employees. That would actually be a really good middle ground to allow collective bargaining without athletes actually becoming employees. That does not fit inside our current legal framework, and I don't really see Congress getting involved. They have plenty of other things to worry about. I don't think this is top of their priority list, so I don't see that coming. But certainly athletes have a bigger voice now and are getting a seat at the table in ways in which 5 years ago, 10 years, 15 years ago, they didn't get. I think more and more they're being invited into rooms, asked to sit on committees, asked to come and speak before Congress. And we have seen some big shifts. I mean, when I first started reporting on college athletics, that was like 15 years ago. And that was when we were having the debate on whether they could have cream cheese on their bagels. So we've come a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things I always wondered about that. Like, were there recruits that went like, listen, I didn't go to Boston College because no cream cheese. And then, I went to Notre Dame because they had two different flavors. Like, that's kind of the dumb thing about it. So, let's talk specifically about the book. When's the release date? People can pre-order now. You can go to wherever you get books and get it. And what's your pitch specifically to the parent, especially of an athlete or an athlete who needs to read this book?
Yeah, so it's called The Athletes NIL Playbook. The original publication date was July 2nd, but actually the books got to my publisher early and they asked if I wanted to go ahead and release them. And I said, yes, the sooner the better. So they've released them. And I saw today that Amazon updated the release date to June 10th, which means they're going to start shipping next week. So it still says pre-order, but it is going to leave next week. I think Barnes & Noble and the rest will follow suit and people will get it before that original July 2nd release date. And it covers like from the ground level, like what is NIL? What are all the different ways you can monetize, beyond just social media marketing and some of the stuff we see in the news? What are all the different ways? And then examples of athletes from all three divisions in a variety of sports, a lot of athletes you've never heard of before, but who are killing it with NIL so that you can see this really is something that is for any athlete who wants to participate in it. There are opportunities and it walks you through what questions do you ask before you hire an agent? How do you price yourself? Where do you find these deals? What do you say when you reach out to a brand? It really is, I think, everything you need to know to get started and to maximize those NIL opportunities.
Kristi, best of luck with the book. It's again, it's a look. There's nothing else like it right now, and so it's one of those things that it's probably a need for a lot of people who, again, there's never been a manual about this. It's very new. So congratulations on the book. I've never written one. But I know, and part of the reason I never have is because it's super hard to do that. So congratulations. This is your second or third book?
This is my second nonfiction, and then I write fiction as well.
Okay. Well, what's harder?
They are hard in very different ways. Okay. Nonfiction takes longer because there's a lot of interviews, a lot of gathering data. You've got to have your facts straight. Whereas with fiction, I can just make stuff up and nobody knows any better.
Well, Kristi, again, congratulations. Thanks for hopping on. And thanks for being a trooper. I know you had to have a rough trip to the dentist today. So thank you so much.
I did. Thanks. This was a lot more fun than that was.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristi. Kristi Dosh, again, she's on Twitter at Sports Biz Miss, and you can get the book